Hi again. This is the part three of this lecture about the early 19th century. And what better place to continue than the place I left off, which is the Greek Revolution. Now I know what you're saying. Greece. Isn't that kind of an ancient history thing? Answer: yes, it is kind of an ancient history thing. Greece had been, for many, many years at this point, under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Now, we really haven't talked about the Ottoman Empire very much since the chapter about Eastern Europe. And that was kind of a, like, oh, hey, and by the way, there was this Islamic empire that maybe you learned about in 7th grade, and they were taking over stuff, and then the Austrians stopped them. Well, they still controlled southeastern Europe, in addition to North Africa and quite a bit of what we think of now as the Middle East. So they were controlling the Greeks. And the Greeks in 1821 started a revolt. This is a product of nationalism, the idea that a group is controlled by another group and that is unjust, the Greeks being the group being treated unjustly by the Ottomans. Culturally, the Greeks they have a long history, they have a long tradition, and frankly, it's a pretty good tradition. If you look at the history books, the Greeks did a lot of stuff. Anyway, a lot of people in Europe are like, whoa, these are the Greeks. These guys are the founders of Western civilization, and maybe we should help them. And of course, Metternich and the conservatives in Europe are like, no, we should not help them because that's liberalism and nationalism, and I hecka hate that. So there's a debate for a while, but eventually Britain, France, and Russia all get involved. Keep in mind, it's not just a, hey, we should help the Greeks because we owe a lot of our civilization to that, but also a, oh, hey, we should help the Greeks because they're Christian and we are Christian nations, and we want to oppose non-Christian nations because it's a very racist time period. Also, Ottomans, non-white, so there's a racist element as well. You got to kind of watch out for that. Anyway, the Greeks are independent by 1830. The Ottomans are defeated. This begins a long series of defeats to the Ottomans that will culminate in them stopping to be on the map after World War I. Ladies, you might want to brace yourself. Yep, it's Fat George Washington. Right there. Right there. Who is this handsome feller right here? Well, that is a thumb. It really does kind of look like, I mean, compare that. Compare this here. And then look at him. Look at this guy. Thumb. Anyway, Louis XVIII had taken over after the events of the Congress of Vienna. They had restored the Bourbon monarchy, as you recall, during the Congress of Vienna. And Louis XVIII was all like, cool. Guys, I'm in charge, and I don't want to immediately make everyone mad, so I'm going to give you a liberal constitution, which is what you wanted at the beginning of the French Revolution, during the liberal phase, which wanted to give more property owning people the right to vote. So everybody's like, yay! Now, only about 100,000 of the wealthiest people in France could vote. And when I say people, I mean men. And when I say men, I mean white men. So this wasn't like super liberal, and it definitely doesn't go past, it wasn't like all property owning males or anything like that. That's crazy talk. That's what liberals ultimately kind of wanted. This isn't even that, but it's in the right direction if you follow. So a lot of French people, especially after the chaos of the French Revolution and the defeat of the Napoleonic era, at least at the end, they were like, oh, okay, we'll take it. But then along comes this dude. Now, this is Charles X, and after Louis XVIII dies, Charles X takes over. And Charles X says, you know what France really needs? Absolutism. Now you might be thinking, wait a second, didn't they sort of have a revolution to get rid of that thought of like, hey, we should have an absolutist monarch and not share the power at all? I mean, that was a pretty significant thing. I'm pretty sure I remember that, you might be thinking. Charles X has short memory. He was like, no, 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 I got this. Look at his portrait over there. He is trying to be as swagged out, as the kids say, as possible. He is trying to be like, look, I want to be just like my hero, Louis XIV. I want to be super fancy. Everybody knows I'm with the Bourbons. Watch me go. Sorry about that. Kind of ashamed. Anyway, so he tried to throw out the constitutional charter. You might be like, wait a second, you mean the constitutional charter that you just talked about on the previous slide that everyone was like, oh, I guess it's okay? The one that wasn't really that great? But, yeah. So it's like saying, like, look, you know what, I know you're starving. Here's a couple of crumbs of food. Not even of bread, of food. And then, before you can eat it, like, you start getting used to these crumbs. Like, oh, okay, you know, hey, I'm starting to get full, but I'm not full yet. Then go, you know what, that's plenty. I decided for you not to eat. You gonna put up with that? No. So, surprisingly, there was a revolution. Mr. Oliver, there's always a revolution in France. Yep. And this is the 1830 revolt in Paris, wherein Louis Philippe, now, Louis Philippe is a Bourbon, but notice he does not adopt the Louis the 19th title or anything like that. He's like, look, guys, I'm one of you. Look at, see this flag? Remember that? Blue, white, and red? Remember the revolution? What did we fight for? We fought for liberty. I will give you that liberty. I will be your constitutional monarch. Whoop! Remember that constitutional charter? That wasn't enough. I'm going to almost double the number of people who can vote. People are like, oh yeah, let's get rid of Charles X. This guy, this is my guy. Your boy Louis Philippe. Now, reality check. 100,000 to 170,000 people in France voting, it's not huge. But it's a step in the right direction. Problem, this guy is not a great leader. By his critics, including Victor Hugo, who writes Les Miserables, which everybody thinks is about the French Revolution. So they go like, oh, it must be the 1789 French Revolution. And it's not. He's talking about people complaining about Louis Philippe. Anyway. Oh, I didn't finish that sentence. I'm sick, in case you can't tell. I know you're looking at me like, he looks the same. No, I don't. Okay. Anyway. Louis Philippe was known as the bourgeois monarch. So he was like thought of as being like, oh, okay, yeah, you're one of us, but you're still our monarch. And his government was known for being corrupt. It was known for being self-serving. He was a bribe taker, enricher of himself. He's not going to last very long. Look at those ruling dates. The R stands for ruled. 1830 to 1848. He is going to not last past 1848. Meanwhile, what's going on over in Great Britain? Well, in Great Britain, they kind of have this more liberal, again, 19th century liberal idea of society. So they say, okay, what can we do to make sure that France stuff doesn't happen over here? They don't say French stuff, they say France stuff, okay? Just deal with it. And so they say, look, we're kind of freaked out. So, unions, strikes, those are scary things. They are scary. These workers getting together, stand up against the factories. We better make that illegal. Also, we better make laws that protect the rich. All right, this is not far thinking. It's positive on the British Parliament's behalf, but keep in mind, the rich landowners were often the ones making the laws. So they made a law that said, okay, you cannot import foreign grain. Okay, so you say, well, big deal. Why do they call it the Corn Laws? Because corn was included in that, okay? But it's not just corn. You say, well, boring, I don't care. Yeah, you do. Because what do you use grain to make? Bread. What is the number one thing that people are eating to survive? Bread. So you can't get it foreign. Okay, you say, whatever, they just get it from Britain. Well, if we make it illegal to buy foreign grain, and the people here in Britain all get together, all these rich dudes, and say, all right, we're all going to raise the prices, and now there's no competition from overseas, so sucks to be you. That's bad for the poor. And that's exactly what they did. Everybody raised prices, and the poor people were like, well, we'll just buy the French grain. They're like, oh, that's illegal now, sorry. I'm like, oh. So I guess we'll just starve. And they're like, no, 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 no. And some people, like the Irish, go like, okay, fine, we cannot afford the kind of bread that we used to be dependent on, so instead our major foodstuff is going to be the potato, which, as you recall from an earlier chapter, is nutritious, delicious, and full of vitamins. The crop doesn't fail very often. Spoilers, it failed. There's something called the potato blight. It's basically like, you know how humans get diseases? Plants can get diseases too. And despite the fact that the potato is a fairly hardy crop, it can be really bad. And so potato crop fails for multiple years, it says there. And the British, or I'm sorry, the English do nothing about it. A lot of Irish people are kind of like, look, you guys may not have planned this for the potato crop to fail, but you certainly didn't help. Notice that in 1846 the Corn Laws are repealed. It's because, not because they want to help the Irish people. They want to make it so the Irish people's problems don't spread to England. They don't want the English to be dying of famine, of starving to death. So they're like, oh, you know what, we better get rid of those laws. A lot of the Irish people are like, look, you guys are just treating us terribly, and this isn't the first time. We've seen it over and over again. You can go back to Cromwell. It's just awful. And the British are just kind of like, or the English are just kind of like, and it's not a good reaction. This is going to continue the rivalry between the Irish and the English. In 1819, the British, again, kind of swinging conservative at this point, despite their very liberal economy and stuff, they decide, you know what, we're worried about some of the socialist talk that's coming over from the continent, from France, those utopian socialists, so to speak. So we are going to control the newspapers and make it illegal to have mass meetings. So in 1819, some workers are protesting. It's a peaceful protest at St. Peter's Fields in Manchester. And you might recall that Manchester was a major industrial city. And soldiers are sent in to bust them up and break this up. They're attacking their own people. Now, the name Battle of Peterloo is meant to evoke popular sentiment and go like, wait a second, Battle of Waterloo, that was that great British victory over the Napoleonic forces, the French, and now, a couple of years later in 1819, our guys are attacking our own people? Not cool. And it's meant, it's kind of a negative thing. Calling it Battle of Peterloo is not like, yay, it's dubbed that by the press. Okay, so in 1832, the British, partially in response to what was going on over in France, they saw that there was a move towards getting rid of Charles X, remember, in that year, and conservatism, kind of movement towards more liberal stuff, and facing protests at home in England. They say, look, we need to change some stuff. So they get rid of a system of electing members to the House of Commons. Basically, okay, this is boring but important. Basically, you had this old way where at one point a city might have been important, but over time maybe they weren't as important. Well, those guys still got to elect 2 members of parliament, 2 MPs. That's what they call them, MPs. It's cute. And to people outside of that, they were like, those are rotten boroughs. In other words, it's unfairly being represented, whereas, you know, these other places that have a lot more people as a result of the industrialization of England, these new places that have risen up, are maybe thought of as lesser or don't get the same voting rights. So the Reform Bill of 1832 is meant to kind of fix that and to get rid of some of those rotten boroughs. It doesn't get rid of 100% of them, but it gets rid of lots. They increase the franchise, the ability to vote, by 50%. You go, wow, that's a lot. A lot more people can vote. 50% more. That's like half the population. Well, realistically, if I have a piece of candy and I buy another piece of candy, that just means I have 2 pieces of candy. It does not mean I have all of the candy, or even a lot. So increasing it by 50% means now 12% of the population can vote instead of, like, oh, math. Instead of 6, is that right? That'd be 100. 9? I'm not a mathematician, okay? So you do the math. It's part of the assignment. Was everybody happy with this? No. Some people were like, that's a good start. We need more. Every man should be able to vote. Notice the sexist language there. They don't mean like everybody. They're sexist. But this does not work. But these people are called the Chartists. Ultimately, they will get their way after the Chartist movement has kind of fallen away. But at the time, this is left of liberal. That is to say, they are like on the spectrum of like, here's your conservatives way over to the right, and then you got your moderates, then you got your liberals. Chartists are to the left of liberals. So that. Oh, notice not women, right? Okay, 1847, we start to see some reform that helps out the problems of the factories. They limit the workday for women and children in factories to 10 hours per day, which, by the way, notice how sexist that is. Women and children, because they're in the same group. Basically, this is, I wrote here, it's evidence of the aristocracy competing with the middle class for support of the working class. When you have more people voting, you have to keep them happy, because you can't just ignore people who can vote. So you have to do more stuff to help them. So this is a problem. All right. What's that? We're just shifting. Why did I shift into first? I don't know. Let's shift to a different. You got to shift one at a time. You can't just shift straight from first to fourth. You nut. How fast are you going? So let's talk about 1848. 1848 is one of those years you need to remember. A whole bunch of stuff happens in 1848. Karl Marx published his Communist Manifesto. It's actually Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx, but everybody just says Karl Marx because it's simpler, because everybody knows Karl Marx. Anyway, also there's a bunch of revolutions that same year. So let's start here. France in 1848. There's another revolt, this time against the corrupt bourgeois monarchy of Louis Philippe. And they're like, look, you know what? We need a republic again. So they proclaim another liberal republic. Yay! They say, let's have an election. And this one dude is like, my last name's Napoleon. I'm like, what? Napoleon's last name wasn't Napoleon. What are you talking about? He's like, oh, wait, let me clarify. I'm a Bonaparte. I am Napoleon's nephew. So I'm going to put on the ballot here, Louis Napoleon, because I'm related to that guy who made France great again. Remember that time we took over all of Europe? Just saying. They're like, whoa, you're saying you want to take over Europe? He's like, no, bro. I don't want socialism. But capitalism is also problematic. I want a third way that is going to get rid of all poverty in all of France without going to socialism. Everybody's like, tell me more, Napoleon. He's like, Louis, please, call me Louis Napoleon. They're like, all right. He's like, elect me president, and I'll make it happen here in France. So in 1848, December 1848, he gets elected president. We'll hear a lot more about him in the next chapters because he is going to be a pretty significant power player in the later 19th century. What about Austria? Well, there's a revolution in Austria that same year. Now you got to think of it like dominoes. Okay, there's all these groups that all want liberal change, and in the case of the Austrians, they also want nationalism. The Hungarians are not their own country, and inspired perhaps by the French, the Austrians go, or I'm sorry, not the Austrians, the Hungarians go, we should rise up. We should have our own country. And Austrian students, college students, are like, yeah, the heck I should. We support them. Metternich is like, I'm out. I saw what happened when France had a revolution back in the late 1700s. I'm outie. I don't want to lose my head. He leaves. The new leader is going to be a young man named Franz Joseph, who is going to grant a new constitution. And then once he's got this new constitution, he's a weasel. He's going to be all like, oh, hey guys, I got you this constitution. You're going to really like it. It's going to give you guys more rights and all that. And the Hungarians are like, oh, okay, cool, thank you. And he's like, oh, by the way, here's an army. Shh, go back to the way it was. What about over in Prussia? Well, there are some people in Prussia who also have nationalistic designs. They want all of Germany to be united. Mr. Oliver, Germany is united today. Yes, it is. Germany is united today. Is this when it happens? No. But a lot of middle-class liberals are like, look, we want to unify all of Germany, and King of Prussia, you're like, who's the King of Prussia? This dude right here. This handsome fella. Frederick William IV. Because I swear, they name everybody Frederick, William, or Frederick William. It's very frustrating. Anyway, so they're all like, oh, hey, Frederick William IV, we want you, the King of Prussia, to be king of all of Germany. And he's like, I want to be king of all of Germany, but at the same time, I don't want the power to come from you, because if you give me power, I'm accountable to you. So, don't like it. So he rejects their crown from the gutter. That's a quote by him, and it is brilliant. He says, these are middle-class liberals. This is not the gutter, but he is exaggerating for effect. He's like, look, I don't want this from you. Ultimately, his relatives in 1806, I don't remember when William I takes over. I want to say William I takes over in 1863, but I feel like that's wrong. I feel like that's when Bismarck takes over. I'll look it up later. I'll look it up for the next lecture because, frankly, it's not important right now. But William I will get all this done. So those were fast. So 3 big revolutions: France, Austria, Prussia. Big revolutions. It's also littler revolutions over in Italy and stuff like that. But none of them really get any changes. They're all liberal revolutions, but no long-lasting changes. I say it's cosmetic. That's what the word McKay uses in the textbook. In other words, it is a temporary. It's like when I put on cosmetics in the morning to put on my face. It's not going to last. But by the end of the 19th century, there's a lot more liberalism in Europe. And by halfway through the 20th century, France, Austria, and Prussia will all have experimented, I'm not saying it's going to last for all of them, spoilers, with democracy and other liberal ideas. So more on that in the next chapter. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.